All right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. I've got a couple of interesting stories for you guys today. The first story that I've got for you guys today, let's talk about Eddie versus Thor. A couple interesting things happened today. The weigh-ins, the press conference, and the official face-off for the Eddie versus Thor fight were all today. Now, I posted the entire full press conference and full weigh-ins on the channel. It's like half an hour long. And I do want to thank Core Sports for all the clips that they've been sending me and allowing me to use in exchange for me taking down that video the other day. So they've been very helpful, and they've really been giving me a lot of access to a lot of cool stuff, so I appreciate them. And if you want to watch the whole thing, check it out. But I'm going to give you guys a recap of some of the main points in this video here in case you don't want to sit and watch a half an hour video. So, the main points, the weigh-in. I think the most surprising and noteworthy part about this was the fact that Eddie Hall weighed in at a 142.2 kgs, a full 10 kgs lighter than Hafthor Bjornsson, who weighed in at 152 kgs. So Thor was about 335 pounds, and Eddie was somewhere between 313 and 314 pounds. So almost, over a 20-pound weight difference between these two guys, which was surprising. So Thor, 20 pounds heavier than Eddie, which I think is significant considering the fact that their build weights going into this thing was that Eddie was going to be heavier than Thor despite being shorter, giving Eddie maybe a size advantage. So I think that aspect is interesting because Thor obviously is the larger man from a height standpoint. He's the more athletic looking guy. He looks a lot slimmer and trimmer, and maybe he has more endurance. And while Eddie appears to be shorter and heavier and thicker, he's actually lighter than Thor, which I don't know, it's an interesting dynamic. I think overall, though, the weigh-ins would point to an advantage for Hafthor. Now, let's talk about the highlights of the press conference itself. And I'll show you guys some clips here. So one big highlight was towards the end of the press conference, where Eddie tells Thor's mom essentially to shut up or be quiet or hush, whatever his exact terminology was. Thor's mom had said something. Eddie disrespected her, or at least Thor felt that he did. And that's when Thor lost his cool, snapped on Eddie, and that's when they kind of had the encounter. So let me roll that clip for you guys right here.
Son, you fucking idiot. My son doesn't care. He thinks you're a fucking nobby. Tell me. Quiet your mum down as well.
Don't ever fucking talk about my mom, you fucking asshole. I'll knock you out.
What? Don't talk about my fucking mom! Never!
So the press conference to me, including this moment, was one of those things that felt a little bit forced. Like they were really trying to sell the fight here. I feel like the drama between Eddie and Thor was really not that necessary here, and some of the reactions from either side, even though I am convinced that they truly don't like each other, the reactions seemed a little bit forced. Now, to be fair, am I way more interested in this fight this week compared to how I felt about it last week? Yes, so some of these tactics, whether a lot of this stuff is staged or forced, or some of you guys think that they're acting completely, whether any of that is true, whatever they're doing seems to be working, because I, for one, am more interested in this fight, way more interested than I was last week. I'm going to be watching it, because like I said, if you put all that stuff aside, the weirdness of the promotion, all the stuff that seems like it's fake or set up, or the acting, I think the one thing that still shines through and appears to be true is that these guys really don't like each other. That, to me, comes across in everything that they do, and it makes me see them want to punch each other. That's the whole point of this fight. Two gigantic dudes that hate each other that are going to punch each other on a live stream for the world to watch. That is entertainment. I mean, think about the fact that their combined body weight, just the two of them, is almost 700 pounds. I think it's right around 650 to be exact, but think about that. Two guys, almost 700 pounds in the ring. That's crazy. That would be the equivalent of like 5 or 6 kind of pretty small guys, but 5 or 6 small guys in the ring. Or maybe 3 or 4 regular size guys. Now, overall, I thought a lot of the press conference was fluff. They brought up the 2017 World's Strongest Man again, the handshake, the lack of sportsmanship, whatever you want to call it. They brought that up, of course. They brought up Eddie having the virus just a few weeks ago. That was what they kept referring to when they said that Eddie had a quote-unquote chest infection. And I think the other highlight here that they brought up was the rematch clause. So it was unclear whether or not in their contract there's a rematch clause, but I guess Eddie wants a rematch and maybe Thor doesn't. To be completely honest, I think these events where Thor has to speak don't work the best in his favor. Again, I think there is a bit of a language barrier there. I think there is a bit of a disconnect where Thor doesn't really win so much in these, linguistics battles, and it's kind of hard to understand. But to me, it sounded like Eddie would like a rematch if he loses, and it sounded like Thor was not so much interested, but then Thor did say if he wants one, we would do one. Which, I don't know. Again, I think it's odd that they're already talking about a rematch when the fight hasn't even happened. And I got to point to, like what I said a couple of videos ago, the fact that Eddie kept saying, if I lose, I have no excuses. If I lose, me being sick won't be an excuse. If I lose, the bicep won't be an excuse. I'll accept it and shake your hand in defeat. And he mentioned that a couple times in this press conference too, in addition to mentioning a potential rematch. To me, it seems like Eddie, in his head, has already played out the possibility of him losing this fight, which I think is a bit odd. Now, I'm sure you'll tell me in the comments below if I'm reading too much into that, but that's kind of the impression that I'm getting from what Eddie is saying. So the highlights of the press conference were the confrontation at the end about Thor's mom, Thor being 10 pounds heavier than Eddie, or 20 pounds heavier, 10 kgs heavier than Eddie, and the discussion about the rematch. And again, this fight is still 2 days away. It's not until Saturday night, March 19th. So they still got a couple days to sit and stew and sit in their rooms and think about each other for the next 48 hours. Which will, of course, be interesting to see how that plays out. Hopefully there's not a confrontation between the two until then. But again, thank you to Core Sports for the footage for the channel, and thank you to Arslan Visuals. So aside from all the Eddie and Thor stuff, I would say really the only other gigantic story today was the statement put out by Arnold Schwarzenegger. It was his message to the Russian people about the Ukraine situation. I thought it was important, so I'm going to roll that, and then we're going to wrap up the video. So here's that clip.
Hello everybody, and thank you for sharing your time with me. I'm sending this message through various different channels to reach my dear Russian friends and the Russian soldiers serving in Ukraine. I'm speaking to you today because there are things that are going on in the world that are being kept from you. Terrible things that you should know about. But before I talk about the harsh realities, let me just tell you about the Russian who became my hero. In 1961, when I was 14 years old, a very good friend of mine invited me to come to Vienna and to watch the World Weightlifting Championships. I was in the audience when Yuri Petrovich Vlasov won the World Championship title, becoming the first human being to lift 200 kilograms over his head. And somehow a friend of mine got me backstage. All of a sudden there I was, a 14-year-old boy, standing in front of the strongest man in the world. I couldn't believe it. He reached out to shake my hand. I mean, I still had a boy's hand. He had this powerful man's hand that swallowed mine. But he was kind, and he smiled at me. I will never forget that day. Never. I went home and I put his photo above my bed to inspire me when I started lifting weights. My father told me to take down that picture and to find a German or an Austrian hero. He got really angry and we argued back and forth. He didn't like Russians because of his experience in the Second World War. You see, he was injured at Leningrad, where the Nazi army that he was part of did vicious harm to the great city and to its brave people. But I did not take the photograph down, no, because it didn't matter to me what flag Yuri Vlasov carried. My connections to Russia didn't stop there, by the way. Oh, it actually deepened when I traveled there with bodybuilding and for my movies and met all my Russian fans. And on one of those trips, I remember, I met Yuri Vlasov once again. It was in Moscow during the filming of Red Heat, which was the first American movie allowed to film in Red Square. Now, he and I spent the whole day together. He was so thoughtful, so kind, and so smart, and, of course, very giving. He gave me this beautiful blue coffee cup. And ever since then, I've been drinking my coffee out of every morning. Now, the reason why I'm telling you all of those things is that ever since I was 14 years old, I've had nothing but affections and respect for the people of Russia. The strength and the heart of the Russian people have always inspired me. And that is why I hope that you will let me tell you the truth about the war in Ukraine and what is happening there. No one likes to hear something critical of the government, I understand that. But As a longtime friend of the Russian people, I hope that you will hear what I have to say. And may I remind you that I speak with the same heartfelt concern as I spoke to the American people when there was an attempted insurrection on January 6th last year, when a wild crowd was storming the US Capitol, trying to overthrow our government. You see, there are moments like this that are so wrong, and then we have to speak up. And it's exactly the same with your government. I know that your government has told you that this is a war to denazify Ukraine. Denazify Ukraine? This is not true. Ukraine is a country with a Jewish president, I might add, whose father's 3 brothers were all murdered by the Nazis. You see, Ukraine did not start this war. Neither did nationalists or Nazis. Those in power in the Kremlin started this war. This is not the Russian people's war. No. As a matter of fact, let me tell you, what you should know is that 141 nations at the UN voted that Russia was the aggressor and called for it to remove its troops immediately. Only 4 countries in the entire world voted with Russia. That is a fact. See, the world has turned against Russia because of its actions in Ukraine. Whole city blocks have been flattened by Russian artillery and bombs, including a children's hospital and a maternity hospital. 3 million Ukrainian refugees, mainly women, children and elderly, fled their country, and many more are trying to seek to get out. It is a humanitarian crisis. Because of its brutality, Russia is now isolated from the society of nations. You're also not being told the truth about the consequences of this war on Russia itself. I regret to tell you that thousands of Russian soldiers that have been killed. They have been caught between Ukrainians fighting for their homeland and the Russian leadership fighting for conquest. Massive amounts of Russian equipment have been destroyed or abandoned. The destruction that Russian bombs are raining down upon innocent civilians has so outraged the world that the strongest global economic sanctions ever taken have been imposed on your country. Those who don't deserve it on both sides of the war will suffer. The Russian government has lied not only to the citizens, but to its soldiers. Some of the soldiers were told they were going to fight Nazis. Some were told that the Ukrainian people would greet them like heroes, and some were told that they were simply going on exercise. They didn't even know that they were going into war. And some were told that they were there to protect ethnic Russians in Ukraine. None of this is true. The fact is that Russian soldiers have faced fierce resistance from the Ukrainians who want to protect their families and their country. When I see babies being pulled out of ruins, I think that I'm watching a documentary about the horrors of the Second World War, not the news of the day. Now let me tell you, when my father arrived in Leningrad, he was all pumped up on the lies of his government. And when he left Leningrad, he was broken, physically and mentally. He lived the rest of his life in pain. Pain from a broken back, pain from the shrapnel that always reminded him of these terrible years, and pain from the guilt that he felt. To the Russian soldiers listening to this broadcast, you already know much of the truth that I've been speaking. You have seen it with your own eyes. I don't want you to be broken like my father. This is not the war to defend Russia that your grandfathers or your great-grandfathers fought. This is an illegal war. Your lives, your limbs, your futures are being sacrificed for a senseless war condemned by the entire world. Now, to those in power in the Kremlin, let me just ask you, why would you sacrifice those young men for your own ambitions? To the soldiers who are listening to this, remember that 11 million Russians have family connections to Ukraine. So every bullet you shoot a brother or a sister. Every bomb or every shell that falls is falling not on an enemy, but on a school, or a hospital, or a home. I know that the Russian people are not aware of such things are happening. So I urge the Russian people and the Russian soldiers in Ukraine to understand the propaganda and the disinformation that you are being told. I ask you to help me spread the truth. Let your fellow Russians know the human catastrophe that is happening in Ukraine. And to President Putin I say, you started this war. You are leading this war. You can stop this war. Now, let me close with a message to all of the Russians who have been protesting on the streets against the invasion of Ukraine. The world has seen your bravery. We know that you have suffered the consequences of your courage. You have been arrested, you have been jailed, and you have been beaten. You are my new heroes. You have the strength of Yuri Petrovich Vlasov. You have the true heart of Russia. My dear Russian friends, may God bless you all.
All right, guys, that wraps up the video. Make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Thumbs up helps a lot. Click the bell notification icon so you never miss an upload. As always, I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power, signing out.